The sun was setting over the bustling streets of downtown New York City. Among the crowd of hurried pedestrians and honking taxis, a little girl sat huddled on the cold pavement, clutching a ragged teddy bear to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her small figure wrapped in a coat far too big for her, with sleeves that dragged along the ground. A cardboard sign sat propped up beside her, the shaky letters almost too large for the piece of torn box. Lost and hungry. Please help. James Carter, a wealthy entrepreneur known for his sharp business sense and no-nonsense attitude, was walking briskly down the street. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues and investors, but something about the girl caught his eye. Her small frame and the vulnerability in her tear-streaked face made him pause mid-step. He stood there for a moment, torn between his usual indifference and an unfamiliar pang of concern. Finally, he crouched down to her level. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual. "What are you doing out here alone?" The girl looked up, her big, watery eyes brimming with fear and uncertainty. I don't know where my mommy is," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the city's noise. James frowned deeply. "How long have you been here?" She clutched her teddy bear tighter, trembling. "I don't know. Since yesterday, I think." Something inside him shifted, a rare moment of compassion breaking through his usual stoicism. Without thinking twice, he extended his hand. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The little girl hesitated, but finally placed her small hand in his. James led her to his waiting car, where he handed her his jacket to keep her warm. He thought about calling the police or social services, but something about the situation told him to handle it himself, at least for now. "I'm taking you to my mother's house," he said, after a long pause. "She'll know how to help." The girl, whose name he soon learned was Lily, leaned against the car window, exhausted but relieved. Little did James know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would change everything in ways he could never imagine. James's sleek black car pulled up in front of a stately brownstone, its red brick facade glowing under the dim streetlights. He glanced at the small figure curled up in the passenger seat, fast asleep. Lily's tiny hands clutched the teddy bear with a grip so tight it seemed as if letting go would shatter her fragile world. He sighed, stepping out and gently lifting her into his arms. For someone used to commanding boardrooms and negotiating billion-dollar deals, holding a child felt oddly foreign. The weight of her small body against his chest stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years, emotions he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. His mother, Eleanor Carter, opened the door before he even knocked. In her late 60s, Eleanor was the polar opposite of her son, warm, empathetic, and deeply involved in community work. Her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun, and her sharp blue eyes softened the moment she saw the child. "James, who is this?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. "I found her downtown," James explained, setting Lily down on the plush sofa. "She was alone, scared. I couldn't just leave her there." Eleanor crouched beside the little girl, gently brushing a strand of matted hair from her face. "Poor thing," she murmured. "What's her name?" "Lily," James replied. "She said she's been lost since yesterday. I didn't want to leave her out there. Figured you'd know what to do." Eleanor smiled faintly, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and surprise. Her son wasn't known for his compassionate side, but this gesture hinted at a depth she hadn't seen in years. "She'll stay here for the night," Eleanor said firmly. "We'll contact the authorities in the morning and figure out where her family is." James nodded, relieved to have passed the responsibility to someone more equipped for it. "Thank you, Mom." As James turned to leave, Lily stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Panic filled her eyes as she realized she was in an unfamiliar place. "It's okay," Eleanor said soothingly, sitting beside her. "You're safe here, Lily. This is my home." Lily clutched her teddy bear and looked at James, her small voice breaking. "You're leaving me?" James froze, caught off guard. "I'll be back in the morning," he said awkwardly. Eleanor touched his arm, her expression a mixture of understanding and quiet reproach. "Why don't you stay for dinner?" Reluctantly, James agreed. As the evening unfolded, Lily's walls began to come down. Over a simple meal of soup and bread, she shared fragments of her story. She had been walking with her mother in a crowded shopping district when they got separated. "I thought she'd come back," Lily whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. But she didn't. Eleanor held her close, whispering comforting words. James, watching from across the table, felt an inexplicable pang of guilt. He didn't have children of his own. He had chosen a life of ambition over family, but something about Lily's vulnerability tugged at a part of him he had buried long ago. Later that night, as Lily slept in one of the guest rooms, Eleanor and James sat in the living room. "There's more to this than you're letting on," Eleanor said, her perceptive eyes studying her son. James hesitated. "I don't know, Mum. I couldn't walk away. Something about her felt different." Eleanor nodded knowingly. Sometimes the universe puts people in our path for a reason. Just as James was about to respond, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. Picking it up, he noticed a strange number flashing across the screen. Against his better judgment, he answered, "Mr. Carter?" The voice on the other end was cold and clipped. "I believe you've taken something that doesn't belong to you." James's heart stopped. "Who is this?" "That little girl you picked up today, Lily," the voice continued, dripping with malice. "She's not just some lost child, and if you want to keep her safe, you'll do exactly as I say." The line went dead before James could respond. He stared at the phone, his chest tightening with dread. "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked, her voice laced with concern. James looked up, his face pale. "We're in trouble," he said grimly. "Big trouble." The next morning, the house was filled with the warm aroma of pancakes and fresh coffee. Eleanor hummed softly in the kitchen while Lily sat at the table, her small hands carefully stacking pieces of toast into a wobbly tower. James entered the room, surprised to see Lily smiling. "You're up early," he said, his tone softer than usual. Lily looked up, her big brown eyes bright. "I helped Miss Eleanor cook. She let me stir the pancake batter." Eleanor glanced over her shoulder, a twinkle in her eye. "She's quite the little chef, James. You might have some competition." James chuckled, sitting down with a steaming mug of coffee. Watching the two of them interact, he felt an unexpected sense of warmth. It was as if Lily had brought a new kind of life to the house, a quiet joy that had been missing for years. "After breakfast, we'll go to the police station," James said gently, not wanting to upset Lily. "They might know something about your mom." Lily's smile faded slightly, and she clutched her teddy bear. What if they can't find her? Eleanor knelt beside her, smoothing a strand of hair from her face. "Then we'll keep looking, sweetheart. You're not alone anymore." The reassurance seemed to comfort Lily, and she nodded. At the police station, Sergeant Mason greeted them with a warm smile. He had a kind face that immediately put Lily at ease. After listening carefully to her story, he promised to do everything in his power to help. "We'll search all recent reports of missing persons," he explained to James and Eleanor. "In the meantime, you're doing the right thing by keeping her safe." Lily tugged on Mason's sleeve. "Will you really find my mommy?" He crouched down to her level, his voice gentle. "I'll do my very best, Lily." As they left the station, Lily's spirits seemed lighter. She held James's hand as they walked back to the car, her small steps quickening to keep up with his longer stride. "Do you think she's looking for me too?" Lily asked suddenly. James glanced down, his heart aching at the innocence in her voice. "I'm sure she is, Lily. Moms never stop looking for their kids." Back at the brownstone, Eleanor pulled out a box of old toys from the attic. "These belonged to James when he was your age," she told Lily. Lily's eyes widened as she sifted through the treasures. Toy cars, a well-loved stuffed dog, and a set of wooden blocks. "Did you play with these, Mr. James?" she asked curiously. James, who was reading the newspaper nearby, looked up with a small smile. "I did. That stuffed dog, his name was Rufus, used to go everywhere with me." Lily held Rufus gently, as if sensing the memories attached to it. "Can I play with him?" "Of course," James said. "He's all yours now." The moment was simple but profound. For the first time in years, James felt a connection to something beyond his work. Lily's presence was a reminder of the things he had forgotten to value: kindness, family, and the joy of small moments. Later that evening, Eleanor tucked Lily into bed, reading her a story about a brave little bird finding its way home. As the girl drifted off to sleep, Eleanor sat beside her, quietly reflecting on how quickly Lily had become part of their lives. When Eleanor joined James in the living room, he was staring out the window, lost in thought. "She's a special little girl," Eleanor said softly, sitting beside him. James nodded. "She's been through so much, but she still smiles, still trusts people." "That's the resilience of children," Eleanor replied. "But it's also because she feels safe with us." James hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we're doing the right thing, keeping her here while the police investigate?" Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. "James, sometimes the right thing isn't about rules or procedures. It's about listening to your heart. And right now your heart is telling you to protect her." Her words resonated with him, easing the doubt that had been gnawing at him all day. The days passed peacefully, filled with simple routines that brought unexpected joy. Lily and Eleanor spent afternoons baking cookies, while James found himself sneaking out of work early just to join them for dinner. But the question of Lily's mother still lingered in the air. Each night, James checked in with Sergeant Mason, hoping for news, but there were no updates. One afternoon, as James and Lily were playing a board game in the living room, she suddenly looked up at him with a serious expression. "Mr. James?" "Yes, Lily? Do you think my mommy will like you?" The question caught him off guard, and he laughed softly. "I think she'll like you more than me." Lily giggled. "But you're nice too, and you make me feel safe." For James, those words were the most meaningful he had heard in years. A week had passed since Lily arrived at the brownstone, and life in the Carter household had taken on a rhythm none of them expected. Eleanor found joy in having a child's laughter fill the rooms again, and James, though reluctant to admit it, felt a warmth in his home that had been missing for years. But questions about Lily's past still lingered. Despite Sergeant Mason's best efforts, there were no clear leads on her mother's whereabouts. The case had drawn some attention from local authorities, but no one had come forward claiming to know Lily. One morning, as the winter sun streamed through the windows, Eleanor sat with Lily at the dining table, helping her write letters to her mommy. Lily carefully scribbled with colorful markers, her tongue poking out in concentration. "This one's my favorite," she said, holding up a drawing of a house with 3 stick figures, one of which was unmistakably Eleanor. Eleanor smiled, her heart melting. "You're quite the artist, Lily. Your mommy will love these when we find her." Lily beamed. "I hope so." That afternoon, James arrived home earlier than usual, carrying a small box. "What's that?" Eleanor asked as he walked into the living room, where she and Lily were playing with a set of wooden blocks. "I thought Lily might like these," James said, setting the box on the floor. Inside were picture books, crayons, and a puzzle of a sunflower field. Lily's eyes lit up. "For me," James nodded. "For you." Without hesitation, Lily launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Thank you, Mr. James." He froze for a moment, then patted her back awkwardly, his expression softening. "You're welcome, kiddo." Eleanor watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. James had always been distant even with her, but Lily had brought out a side of him she hadn't seen since he was a boy. Later that evening, as they sat around the dining table, Lily spoke up between bites of spaghetti. "Miss Eleanor, did Mr. James have a mommy too?" Eleanor chuckled. "Yes, he did, sweetheart. I'm his mommy." Lily's eyes widened. "You are? That's funny. You're too nice to be his mommy." James nearly choked on his water, while Eleanor laughed heartily. "Well, thank you, Lily. I'll take that as a compliment." That night, James found himself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the puzzle Lily had started earlier. One corner of the sunflower was complete, and a few stray pieces lay scattered on the coffee table. He picked up one of the pieces, turning it over in his hand. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. "Are you sad?" James looked up to see Lily standing in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear. "No," he said softly. "Just thinking." She walked over and climbed onto the couch beside him, her tiny feet tucked under her. "About what?" James hesitated, unsure how to explain the mix of emotions swirling inside him. "About how life changes, sometimes in ways you don't expect." Lily tilted her head. "Is that bad?" "Not always," he replied, smiling faintly. "Sometimes it's good." She leaned against him, her head resting on his arm. "I think it's good you found me." James swallowed the lump in his throat, patting her head gently. "I think so too, Lily." The following day brought an unexpected visitor. As Eleanor and Lily baked cookies in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. James opened the door to find a young woman standing there, holding a small notebook. She introduced herself as Claire Benson, a volunteer with a local non-profit that helped reunite families. "I've been following Lily's case," Claire said, her voice kind but professional. "May I come in?" James hesitated, then nodded, inviting her into the living room. Claire explained that she had seen Lily's story shared through a network of shelters and community organizations. "We believe her mother might be looking for her, but we're still trying to confirm some details. I wanted to meet Lily in person to see if she remembers anything else that might help." Eleanor brought Lily into the room, her hands still dusted with flour. At first, Lily was shy, clinging to Eleanor's side, but Claire's gentle demeanor soon put her at ease. "Lily," Claire said, showing her a few photos. "Do any of these look familiar to you?" Lily studied the images carefully. One showed a busy shopping center, another a park, and the last a woman with a warm smile. "That's my mommy," Lily exclaimed, pointing to the photo of the woman. James and Eleanor exchanged a look of relief and surprise. Claire smiled. That's wonderful, Lily. This gives us a big clue to finding her. We'll keep you updated every step of the way. That evening, as Lily slept soundly upstairs, James and Eleanor sat together, reflecting on the day's events. She might actually be reunited with her mother soon, James said quietly. Eleanor nodded, a bittersweet smile on her face. That's what we've been hoping for, isn't it? James sighed. It is, but I didn't think it would be this hard to let go. Eleanor placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. That's because you've let her into your heart, James. And no matter what happens, that bond will stay with both of you forever. James nodded, his expression thoughtful. Deep down, he knew Eleanor was right. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, as Claire and her organization worked tirelessly to confirm Lily's connection to the woman in the photo. Each evening, James and Eleanor reassured Lily that everything was moving forward, and that soon she might see her mother again. Still, life in the brownstone carried on with its newfound warmth. Lily had become the heart of the household, her laughter and curiosity bringing a sense of purpose and joy that neither James nor Eleanor had realized they were missing. One afternoon, James returned home early to find Eleanor and Lily in the backyard. Lily was giggling as she tossed breadcrumbs to a pair of sparrows fluttering on the garden path. "What's all this?" James asked, setting his briefcase on the patio table. Miss Eleanor said birds like snacks too, Lily explained, her cheeks pink from the cold. James chuckled. She's right about that. He crouched down, picking up a small handful of crumbs. "Here, let me show you something." He tossed the crumbs into the air and the birds swooped down gracefully, snatching them mid-flight. Lily gasped in delight. "They're so fast," she exclaimed. James grinned, feeling a rare sense of pride. "It's all about timing, Lily. You've got to watch and learn how they move." Lily tried to mimic his technique, her small hands tossing the crumbs upward. Though the birds missed her first attempts, she didn't give up, her determination bringing a smile to James's face. Eleanor watched the scene from the kitchen window, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. She knew the bond James was forming with Lily would make it even harder when the time came to say goodbye. Later that evening, as Lily sat at the dining table coloring, James received a call from Claire. "We've located Lily's mother," Claire said, her tone excited. "Her name is Emma, and she's been searching for Lily for weeks. She was overwhelmed with relief when we showed her the photo." James felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, but also an ache he couldn't quite explain. "That's great news," he said, trying to sound upbeat. "What's the next step?" "Emma is eager to see Lily," Claire explained. "But we want to ensure the reunion happens in a way that's comfortable for everyone, especially Lily. Would you and Eleanor be willing to meet Emma first?" James hesitated, glancing at Lily, who was happily humming to herself. "Of course. Let's set it up." The following day, James and Eleanor met Claire at a small community center where Emma was waiting. When they entered the room, James's first impression was of a woman who had endured far more than her share of hardship. Emma's eyes were red-rimmed from tears, but her smile was radiant as she rose to greet them. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for taking care of my little girl." Eleanor stepped forward, her warmth evident. "Lily is a wonderful child. It's been a joy having her with us." James shook Emma's hand, his usual composure softening. "She's safe, and she's been surrounded by love. That's what matters." Emma's voice broke as she shared her story. "Lily and I were in the city running errands when we got separated in the crowd. I looked everywhere, called the police, but it was like she had vanished. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again." Claire placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "You don't have to worry anymore, she's coming back to you." James nodded, his throat tight. "She's been asking about you every day. She's going to be so happy." When James and Eleanor returned home, Lily ran to greet them, her face lighting up as she saw James walk through the door. "Did you find out anything about my mommy?" she asked eagerly. James knelt down, taking her small hands in his. "Yes, Lily, we found her. She's been looking for you this whole time." Lily's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Really? Where is she?" "She's close by," James said gently, "and tomorrow you're going to see her." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but her smile was brighter than ever. "Thank you, Mr. James." She hugged him tightly, and he held her for a moment, knowing their time together was nearing its end. That evening, as Lily prepared for bed, she asked Eleanor to read her a story. James stood in the doorway watching as Eleanor's soothing voice filled the room. "Will you and Mr. James come with me to meet my mommy?" Lily asked, her voice soft and sleepy. "Of course, sweetheart," Eleanor replied, stroking her hair. Lily yawned, her eyelids fluttering shut. "I'm glad I found you both," she murmured. Eleanor's voice caught in her throat, but she managed a smile. "We're glad too, Lily. More than you'll ever know." As James sat in the living room later that night, Eleanor joined him with a cup of tea. "She's going to be so happy tomorrow," Eleanor said. James nodded, staring into his own cup. "She deserves to be with her mum, but it's going to feel empty without her here." Eleanor reached over, placing her hand over his. "That's because she's reminded us of what's important, James, and that's something we can hold on to, no matter where she is." He nodded, grateful for his mother's wisdom. As much as it hurt, he knew this chapter in their lives had been a gift. The days after meeting Emma were bittersweet for James and Eleanor as they began to prepare for Lily's transition back to her mother. While they knew this was the best outcome for the little girl, the thought of her leaving left an undeniable emptiness in their hearts. Lily, no stranger to change, seemed to approach the situation with a mixture of excitement and quiet apprehension. She spent her mornings drawing pictures for her mother and her afternoons enjoying time with Eleanor and James, her laughter filling the house with a warmth they hadn't realized they needed. One afternoon, Eleanor noticed Lily carefully folding one of her drawings, a picture of the brownstone surrounded by colorful flowers with 3 smiling stick figures labeled Miss Eleanor, Mr. James, and me. She slipped the folded paper into the arms of her teddy bear. "I'm giving this to Mr. Buttons," Lily explained with a shy smile. "He'll keep it safe when I go to Mommy." Eleanor's chest tightened at the simplicity of the gesture. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart," she said, brushing a strand of Lily's hair behind her ear. Watching from the corner of the room, James found himself unusually quiet, caught between happiness for Lily and the ache of knowing her time with them was coming to an end. That evening, as James sat in his study, working through a stack of documents, Eleanor appeared at the door with 2 cups of tea. She set one on his desk and took the seat opposite him. "You've been quiet today?" she said gently, her gaze soft but probing. James sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's just hard, Mom. Letting her go. I know it's the right thing, but it doesn't feel any easier." Eleanor studied him for a moment before speaking. "It's never easy to say goodbye to someone you care about, especially a child like Lily, but the love she found here will stay with her. That's what matters." James nodded, though the knot in his chest remained. The next morning, in an effort to create a final happy memory, James and Eleanor planned a surprise for Lily, a small picnic in the park. When they told her, her face lit up with joy. "Can Mr. Buttons come too?" she asked eagerly, and James chuckled. Of course he wouldn't want to miss it. The picnic turned out to be one of the happiest days they'd shared. Under a large oak tree, they spread out a checkered blanket, setting out sandwiches, fresh fruit, and a cake Eleanor had baked that morning. Lily spent the afternoon chasing butterflies and laughing as the breeze tousled her hair. James and Eleanor watched her from the blanket, their hearts full despite the bittersweet occasion. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the park, Lily returned to the blanket, clutching her teddy bear and smiling brightly. "Thank you for today," she said sincerely. "It's the best day ever." Eleanor pulled her into a hug, blinking back tears as she whispered, "You've made our lives so much brighter, Lily. We'll never forget you." James, uncharacteristically sentimental, handed Lily a small gift box. "What's this?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Open it and see," he said, watching her closely. Lily carefully unwrapped the box, revealing a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny heart-shaped charm. Her eyes widened with wonder. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, holding it up to the fading sunlight. "It's a reminder," James said, his voice quieter than usual, "that you'll always be part of our family." Overwhelmed, Lily threw her arms around him, her gratitude spilling over in the hug. James held her tightly, realizing just how much the little girl had changed him in such a short time. As they packed up the picnic and returned home, the reality of Lily's departure settled in more deeply for James and Eleanor. While the day had been a celebration of their time together, it was also a reminder of the impending goodbye. Yet, in the midst of their mixed emotions, there was a quiet certainty. Lily had left a permanent mark on their hearts, and the love they had shared would remain with them forever. The morning of Lily's reunion with her mother arrived with a calm stillness in the air. The brownstone felt quieter than usual, the anticipation of the day hanging heavily in every corner. Eleanor woke early to prepare Lily's favorite breakfast, fluffy pancakes shaped like hearts, served with a dollop of whipped cream and fresh strawberries. Lily sat at the table, her teddy bear tucked under one arm, and swung her legs beneath her chair as she waited. James entered the room, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, and paused when he saw Lily. Big day today, huh? He asked, his voice steady, though a hint of emotion lingered beneath it. Lily nodded, a smile lighting up her face. I'm a little nervous, she admitted, poking at a strawberry with her fork. What if Mummy doesn't recognize me? Eleanor crouched beside her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. She will, sweetheart. A mother never forgets her child. Lily glanced up at James, seeking his reassurance. Do you think so too, Mr. James? James sat down beside her, his serious expression softening into a warm smile. I know so. She's been looking for you this whole time, Lily. Today's the day she finally gets to see you again. As they finished breakfast, Eleanor helped Lily change into her dress, her favorite one, light pink with small embroidered flowers along the hem. She tied a matching ribbon in Lily's hair and stood back to admire her. You look like an angel, Eleanor said, her voice wavering slightly. Do you think Mommy will like my dress? Lily asked, spinning in a small circle to make the skirt flare. She'll love it, Eleanor said, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead. James waited by the door, car keys in hand, and watched as Eleanor and Lily came down the stairs. His chest tightened at the sight of the little girl holding Eleanor's hand, looking both excited and unsure. Ready to go, kiddo? He asked, forcing a casual tone. Lily nodded, clutching her teddy bear close. Mr. Buttons is ready too. The drive to the community center felt longer than usual, though the streets were clear and the sun shone brightly. Lily sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window as the buildings passed by. Eleanor turned in her seat, watching her carefully. Are you all right, Lily? Lily shrugged, her small fingers tracing the stitching on her bear. I'm happy, but I'm going to miss you and Mr. James. Eleanor's heart ached at the honesty of the statement, but she smiled warmly. You'll always be part of our family, Lily, and you can visit us whenever you like. James, his hands gripping the steering wheel, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. We'll miss you too, but you're going where you belong, with your mum. She loves you, just like we do. When they arrived at the community center, Claire was waiting outside to greet them. She waved, her kind smile reassuring. Lily, are you ready? She asked, crouching to Lily's level. Lily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes. Claire led them inside to a private room where Emma was waiting. The moment Lily stepped through the door, Emma's face lit up with joy. Lily, she exclaimed, kneeling with open arms. Lily's steps were tentative at first, but as soon as she recognized the warmth in her mother's voice, she ran to her, wrapping her arms around her neck. Emma held her tightly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, I missed you so much, my sweet girl. James and Eleanor stood back, giving them space to reconnect. Claire wiped her eyes discreetly, moved by the reunion. After a few minutes, Emma looked up, her gaze meeting James's and Eleanor's. Thank you, she said earnestly, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for taking care of her, for keeping her safe. Eleanor stepped forward, placing a hand on Emma's arm. She's a remarkable little girl. It was an honor to have her with us. James nodded, his expression softer than usual. She brought something special into our lives. We're the ones who are grateful. Emma smiled through her tears, her gratitude evident. You've given her so much love. I'll make sure she knows how lucky she is to have you both in her life. As the adults talked, Lily stayed close to her mother, but her gaze drifted back to James and Eleanor. Will I still see you? She asked, her voice small but hopeful. Eleanor knelt down, pulling Lily into a hug. Of course, sweetheart. You're part of our family now, and that doesn't change just because you're going home. James crouched beside them, ruffling Lily's hair. You'll always have a place with us, kiddo. Lily hugged them both tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I love you, she whispered. We love you too, Eleanor said, her voice breaking slightly. After saying their goodbyes, James and Eleanor watched as Lily walked out of the room, hand in hand with her mother. The sight was bittersweet, full of joy for Lily's happiness, but tinged with the sadness of parting. As they drove home, the car was quiet, each of them lost in their thoughts. Finally, Eleanor spoke. We did the right thing. James nodded, his gaze focused on the road. Yeah, we did, but it doesn't make it any easier. Eleanor placed a comforting hand on his arm. Love never is, James, but it's always worth it. He glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You're right about that. The days following Lily's reunion with her mother brought a quiet stillness to the Carter household. The brownstone, once filled with Lily's laughter and chatter, now seemed larger and emptier. Eleanor and James each found their own ways of adjusting, though neither spoke much about how deeply they missed her presence. Eleanor busied herself with small projects around the house, rearranging bookshelves and tending to the garden, though her thoughts often wandered to Lily. She had kept a few of the girl's drawings, which now adorned the refrigerator and the small corkboard in her office. Every time she walked by them, a pang of longing struck her, but it was softened by the knowledge that Lily was safe and happy. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor found herself in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread. The rhythmic motion usually soothed her, but today her thoughts were elsewhere. She paused, glancing toward the window, where raindrops slid down the glass in steady streams. In the reflection, she caught sight of the small teddy bear that Lily had forgotten in her rush to leave with her mother. It sat on the corner of the counter, its well-worn fur and crooked bow tie a bittersweet reminder of the little girl who had changed their lives. James, on the other hand, had thrown himself into work. His days were filled with meetings, conference calls, and paperwork, but no matter how busy he stayed, there was always a moment when his thoughts drifted to Lily. He'd find himself staring at the framed drawing she had given him, now hanging prominently on the wall of his office. The picture, though simple, held a profound meaning for him. It was a reminder of the connection they had shared and the joy she had brought into his life. One evening, as James returned home from work, he found Eleanor sitting in the living room with a cup of tea. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the rain outside. "You're home late," Eleanor said, looking up as he walked in. "Got caught up with some paperwork," James replied, loosening his tie and sitting down across from her. He noticed the teddy bear on the side table and frowned. "She forgot that, didn't she?" Eleanor nodded, picking up the bear and smoothing its fur. "Hey, it's funny, isn't it, how something so small can hold so much meaning?" James leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "I think about her all the time," he admitted, "about how she just walked into our lives and turned everything upside down." Eleanor smiled softly. "She didn't just turn it upside down, James. She brought us back to what really matters. Family, connection, love, things we sometimes forget to prioritize." James nodded, his gaze distant. "She taught me more in a few weeks than I've learned in years, and she didn't even know she was doing it." The two sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Eleanor broke the quiet. "You know, we could write to her. I'm sure Emma wouldn't mind if we stayed in touch." James glanced at her, a small smile forming. "That's a good idea. She'd like that." Eleanor set down her tea and reached for a notepad and pen. "Let's write her a letter together." A week later, their first letter to Lily was sent off. It was filled with stories about the garden, updates on the house, and little reminders of how much they missed her. James included a picture of the teddy bear, along with a note that said, "Mr. Buttons is waiting for you whenever you come to visit." To their delight, a response arrived only a few days later. The envelope was covered in colorful stickers, and inside was a handwritten letter from Emma, along with a picture Lily had drawn of herself holding hands with James and Eleanor. The note from Emma expressed her gratitude once again, saying that Lily spoke about them every day and often asked when she could visit. The letter brought a sense of comfort to both James and Eleanor. It wasn't the same as having Lily in their home, but it was a connection, a way to keep her close, even from afar. One sunny afternoon, as James was finishing some work in his study, Eleanor came into the room holding the phone. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "That was Emma," she said. "She and Lily are planning to visit next weekend." James felt a surprising surge of emotion at the news. "Really?" Eleanor nodded, her smile widening. "Lily insisted. She said she needs to pick up Mr. Buttons and show us her new bracelet." James chuckled, shaking his head. "That kid. She's something else." Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "She's family, James. And no matter where she is, she'll always be a part of us." As the weekend approached, the anticipation of Lily's visit filled the house with a renewed sense of energy. Eleanor baked cookies and cleaned every corner of the brownstone, while James found himself smiling more often, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The thought of seeing Lily again, of hearing her laughter and seeing her bright smile, was enough to remind them both of the simple truth: love, once shared, never truly fades. The weekend of Lily's visit arrived with a crispness in the air that felt almost celebratory. Eleanor had spent the morning bustling around the house, fluffing pillows, baking Lily's favorite cookies, and setting out the small collection of toys that had once belonged to James. Every detail of the day seemed imbued with love and care, as though preparing the home for a family reunion. James, though less outwardly expressive, also contributed to the preparations. He mowed the lawn, polished the coffee table, and even dusted the bookshelf, a rare gesture for someone who rarely concerned himself with such things. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but the thought of seeing Lily again had brought a lightness to his usually serious demeanor. By early afternoon, the doorbell rang. Eleanor opened the door to find Emma and Lily standing on the stoop, their faces bright with excitement. Lily was clutching her teddy bear tightly, the small silver bracelet James had given her, sparkling in the sunlight. "Miss Eleanor," Lily exclaimed, running forward to wrap her arms around her. Eleanor knelt down, holding her close and smiling through the lump that had formed in her throat. "Lily, sweetheart, it's so good to see you," Eleanor said, her voice soft but full of joy. Emma stood back, her eyes misty as she watched the reunion. "She's been counting down the days," she said to Eleanor with a laugh. "This morning, she woke me up at 6, saying it was time to go." Eleanor smiled and gestured for them to come inside. James appeared in the living room doorway, his usual stoicism giving way to a genuine smile when he saw Lily. "Mr. James," Lily called, running to him with her arms open. He crouched down, catching her in a hug. "Hey, kiddo," he said, ruffling her hair. "It's good to see you." Lily pulled back just enough to hold up her teddy bear. "I told Mr. Buttons he'd be back home today. He missed you too." James chuckled, his heart warming at her words. "Well, I missed him, and you, just as much." The afternoon passed in a flurry of activity. Lily quickly made herself at home, running through the garden and rediscovering all the little things she had loved about the Carter household. She spent time with Eleanor in the kitchen, helping to decorate cookies with colorful icing and sprinkles, while James taught her how to build a small wooden tower with the blocks she had left behind. At one point, Emma sat with Eleanor at the dining table, sipping tea and watching Lily play. "I can't thank you enough," Emma said quietly. "You didn't just take care of her. You gave her a home, even if it was only for a little while." Eleanor reached over, placing a hand on Emma's. "She gave us just as much, if not more. This house felt empty before Lily came into our lives. She reminded us what it means to love unconditionally." Emma nodded, her expression filled with gratitude. "She talks about you and James all the time. You've become such an important part of her life." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling at the thought. "And she'll always be part of ours." As the sun began to set, the four of them gathered in the living room. Lily climbed onto the couch between James and Eleanor, clutching her teddy bear and resting her head against Eleanor's shoulder. "Mr. James," she said suddenly, looking up at him, "did you know Mommy said I can visit you whenever I want?" James raised an eyebrow, glancing at Emma, who smiled and nodded in confirmation. "That's right," Emma said. "We'll make sure you can see them as often as possible." James's heart felt lighter at the news. "Well, kiddo, you've always got a place here. Anytime you want to visit, we'll be waiting." Lily grinned, her face lighting up with happiness. "Even if I bring Mr. Buttons and all my toys?" "Especially if you bring Mr. Buttons and all your toys," James replied, laughing. The room filled with laughter and warmth, the kind of moment that seemed to encapsulate everything they had all learned from the time they had spent together. When it was time for Emma and Lily to leave, the goodbyes were filled with more smiles than tears, as the promise of future visits softened the sadness of parting. Eleanor knelt to hug Lily tightly, whispering, "We love you, sweetheart. Don't forget that." "I won't," Lily said, her voice steady despite her watery eyes. "I love you too, Miss Eleanor." James crouched down next, pulling Lily into one final hug. "Take care, kiddo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Lily pulled back, smiling through her tears. "You too, Mr. James. Don't forget to feed the birds for me." James chuckled, nodding. "You've got it." As Emma and Lily drove away, Eleanor and James stood together on the front steps, watching until the car disappeared around the corner. The house felt quiet again, but this time it wasn't the same kind of emptiness. It was filled with the echoes of laughter, the memory of shared moments, and the knowledge that their bond with Lily would remain strong no matter where she was. Eleanor slipped her arm through James's as they turned to go inside. "We'll see her again soon," she said confidently. James nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, we will." For the first time in years, the brownstone didn't just feel like a house, it felt like a home. The weeks following Lily's visit left an indelible mark on James and Eleanor. Though the house had returned to its usual calm, the echoes of her laughter and presence lingered in every room. For both of them, life felt richer, as if Lily's brief return had reignited something they didn't know was missing. Eleanor had taken to spending her mornings in the garden, where she often reflected on the joy Lily had brought into their lives. The flowers seemed brighter, the air fresher, and the birds more eager to gather around the feeder Lily had so carefully tended. One morning, as she trimmed a row of roses, she caught herself humming one of the songs Lily had sung while baking cookies. The memory brought a smile to her face and a tear to her eye. Inside the house, Small reminders of Lily were everywhere. The drawings she had made still adorned the fridge and the walls, and Mr. Buttons, her beloved teddy bear, now had a special spot on the living room shelf. Eleanor had initially planned to mail the bear back to Lily, but found herself unable to part with it. It wasn't just a toy. It was a symbol of the love that had grown within their home. James, meanwhile, found himself changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. Once a man consumed by work and ambition, he now prioritized time with his mother and moments of quiet reflection. He had started leaving the office earlier, something his colleagues and assistants noticed immediately. When asked why, he simply said, "There are more important things waiting for me at home." One evening, Eleanor found James sitting on the back patio, staring at the sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. She joined him, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You've been spending a lot of time out here lately," Eleanor said, handing him a mug. James nodded, his gaze still fixed on the fading colors of the sunset. "It's peaceful. Gives me time to think." Eleanor sipped her tea, watching him carefully. "And what have you been thinking about?" He paused, then said, "About how much has changed. About how one little girl could come into our lives and completely turn everything around." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "She didn't just change the house, James. She changed you. I see it every day." James turned to her, his expression soft but serious. "She reminded me of what matters. For so long, I've been chasing things that felt important. Success, money, recognition, but none of it compares to what we had with her here." Eleanor reached over, placing a comforting hand on his. "That's the beauty of love, James. It has a way of making everything else seem smaller." James nodded, his heart lighter with the realization. In the days that followed, James and Eleanor continued to exchange letters with Lily and Emma. Each envelope brought a sense of excitement and warmth, as though a piece of their extended family was arriving through the mail. Lily's letters were filled with stories about her new school, her favorite books, and how much she missed Miss Eleanor and Mr. James. She often included drawings of their brownstone, always with bright flowers and happy faces. One particular letter stood out to James. In it, Lily had written, "Dear Mr. James, I told my teacher about you and Miss Eleanor. She said you must be very kind and brave to help me when I was lost. I think she's right. I hope you know you're my hero. Love, Lily." James read the letter several times, the simple words leaving a profound impact on him. He kept it in his desk drawer, pulling it out whenever he needed a reminder of what truly mattered. For Eleanor, the letters became a source of inspiration. She began volunteering at the local shelter, helping children and families in need. It was her way of honoring Lily and the lessons she had brought into their lives. The work was fulfilling, and she often came home with stories that warmed James's heart. One day, as Eleanor was sorting through donations, she came across a small, worn teddy bear. It reminded her of Mr. Buttons, and she smiled at the memory of Lily clutching the bear tightly on her first night at the brownstone. That evening, as she shared the story with James, he laughed softly. "It's funny, isn't it? How something as small as a teddy bear can hold so much meaning." Eleanor nodded. "It's not the object itself, it's what it represents. Love, safety, and a connection that lasts, even when we're apart." James leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "She's still with us, isn't she? Even when she's not here." Eleanor smiled. "She always will be. That's the beauty of the bond we've built." As they sat together in the quiet of the evening, they both felt a profound sense of gratitude. Lily had come into their lives like a whirlwind, and though her time with them had been brief, the impact was lasting. She had taught them about love, resilience, and the importance of cherishing the people who come into their lives, even if only for a short time. The weeks following Lily's visit brought a quiet anticipation to the Carter household. Though the days had returned to their usual rhythm, both James and Eleanor found themselves thinking often of the little girl who had filled their home with such joy. One crisp autumn morning, as Eleanor was arranging flowers in the living room, the phone rang. She answered quickly, her heart lifting as soon as she heard Lily's cheerful voice on the other end. "Miss Eleanor, Mommy said we can visit for Thanksgiving," Lily exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. "She said it's okay because you're family too." Eleanor's eyes filled with happy tears as she sat down, clutching the phone. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news. We'd love to have you here for Thanksgiving." James walked into the room just as Eleanor covered the receiver and whispered, "Lily's coming for Thanksgiving." He paused, his usual composed demeanor breaking into a smile. "Can we come next week?" Lily asked eagerly. "Any time, darling. We'll be ready for you," Eleanor assured her, and Lily's giggle warmed her heart. The days leading up to Thanksgiving became a whirlwind of preparation. Eleanor poured herself into the details, planning a menu filled with Lily's favorite foods, setting out her best dishes, and decorating the house with festive touches. She even pulled out a special tablecloth embroidered with fall leaves, one she only used on special occasions. James, though quieter in his anticipation, found himself drawn into the preparations as well. He hung garlands of autumn leaves around the windows, rearranged the furniture to create more space, and even joined Eleanor in baking pies. "You're taking this pretty seriously," Eleanor teased, as James carefully placed a pie crust into the dish. "Can't let Lily down," James replied with a smirk, though the sincerity in his tone was unmistakable. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the windows. Eleanor woke early to start cooking, filling the house with the comforting aromas of turkey, spiced cider, and fresh rolls. By midday, everything was ready, and Eleanor stood by the front door, nervously adjusting the collar of her sweater. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her heart leap. Emma stepped out first, holding the door open as Lily scrambled out, clutching her teddy bear tightly. The little girl ran up the steps, her face glowing with excitement. "Miss Eleanor?" Lily shouted, throwing her arms around her. Eleanor knelt, pulling her into a tight hug. "Oh, Lily, we've missed you so much." James appeared behind her, smiling as he watched the reunion. Lily turned to him, her eyes lighting up. "Mr. James," she exclaimed, running to hug him. James crouched down, catching her in his arms. "Hey, kiddo, it's good to see you." Lily pulled back slightly, holding up her teddy bear. "Mr. Buttons missed you too." James chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Well, I missed him. And you. Just as much." Inside, the house felt warm and alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation. The dining room table, set with Eleanor's finest dishes, was filled with food and surrounded by happy faces. Lily chatted non-stop about her school, her friends, and the drawings she had been working on. "I made this for you," she said, pulling out a folded piece of paper and handing it to Eleanor. It was a colorful drawing of their brownstone, surrounded by fall leaves, with 3 stick figures labeled Miss Eleanor, Mr. James, and me. Eleanor blinked back tears as she admired it. "This is beautiful, Lily. It's going right on the fridge." "Next to the other ones?" Lily asked, her eyes shining. "Exactly," Eleanor replied, smiling warmly. After the meal, they moved to the living room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace. Lily curled up on the couch between James and Eleanor, her teddy bear resting on her lap. "Mr. James," she said suddenly, looking up at him, "did you know Mommy says you're like a hero?" James blinked, surprised. "A hero? Me?" Lily nodded earnestly. "She said, heroes do the right thing even when it's hard. That's what you did when you found me." James felt a lump in his throat, but he managed to smile. "Well, your mum's the real hero. She never stopped looking for you." "And Miss Eleanor," Lily added, reaching for Eleanor's hand, "because she made me feel like I had a family." Eleanor squeezed her hand gently, her heart swelling. "You'll always have a family here, Lily. Always." As the evening wore on, it was time for Emma and Lily to leave. The goodbyes were warm, filled with promises of future visits. Eleanor hugged Lily tightly, whispering, "We love you, sweetheart, don't forget that." "I love you too," Lily replied, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. James crouched down next, pulling Lily into one last hug. "Take care, kiddo," he said softly. Lily pulled back, her eyes bright with happiness. "You too, Mr. James. Don't forget to feed the birds for me." James chuckled, nodding. "You've got it." As the car drove away, James and Eleanor stood on the front steps, watching until it disappeared around the corner. Though the house felt quieter again, it was far from empty. The love they had shared with Lily remained, filling every corner and reminding them that family wasn't just about who you were born to. It was about the connections you chose to nurture. The days following Thanksgiving brought a sense of peace to the Carter household. Though the house was quieter without Lily's boundless energy, James and Eleanor carried the warmth of her visit with them. Her drawings were proudly displayed on the refrigerator, her stories replayed in their minds, and her presence felt in the smallest details, like the way Eleanor would hum songs Lily had sung, or how James found himself lingering in the garden where she had loved to feed the birds. One evening, as James sat in his study going over a stack of documents, he caught sight of the small framed drawing Lily had given him. It hung on the wall beside his bookshelf, a bright and cheerful reminder of the connection they had shared. He set down his pen, leaning back in his chair as memories of Lily filled his thoughts. A knock on the door pulled him from his reverie. Eleanor stepped in, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. "Taking a break?" she asked, setting one mug on his desk. "I might be," James replied with a faint smile. "Got a lot on my mind." Eleanor sat in the chair opposite him, cradling her mug. "Thinking about Lily?" James nodded. "It's strange, isn't it? How someone can come into your life so suddenly and change everything." "She didn't just change things, James," Eleanor said, her tone gentle. "She reminded us of what's important: family, love, and the small moments that make life meaningful." James glanced at her, his expression softening. "You're right. For a long time I think I forgot about those things. Lily brought them back." Eleanor smiled, her gaze warm. "And that's something we'll carry with us forever." The conversation left James thoughtful. Over the next few days, he found himself reflecting on what he truly valued in life. He began to make small but significant changes, like leaving work earlier to spend time with Eleanor or taking walks in the park where he and Lily had once played. These moments brought him a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. Eleanor too embraced the lessons Lily had taught them. She began volunteering more frequently at the local shelter, helping families in need and offering comfort to children who reminded her of Lily. The work gave her a renewed sense of purpose, and she often returned home with stories of the lives she had touched. One crisp December morning, as Eleanor was baking cookies in the kitchen, the phone rang. She answered quickly, her heart lifting as soon as she heard Emma's voice on the other end. "Hello, Eleanor," Emma began warmly. "I hope you and James are doing well. Lily has been talking about you both non-stop." Eleanor chuckled, her heart swelling. "We've been thinking about her too. How is she?" "She's wonderful," Emma said, her tone filled with gratitude. "She's thriving at school and she's made so many friends, but she keeps asking about when we can visit again." Eleanor's eyes brightened. "Well, you're always welcome here, Emma, anytime." "Actually," Emma said, "we were wondering if you might like to spend Christmas with us. Lily's been begging to invite you and James." Eleanor's breath caught at the unexpected invitation. "That's so kind of you, Emma. Let me talk to James, but I'm sure we'd love to." After ending the call, Eleanor found James in the living room reading the newspaper. She shared Emma's invitation, watching his face carefully. "She wants us to spend Christmas with them?" James asked, lowering the paper. Eleanor nodded. "Lily wants us there. What do you think?" James didn't hesitate. "I think we should go. She's part of our family, and Christmas is about being with the people you love." Eleanor smiled, her heart warming at his response. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with anticipation. Eleanor and James shopped for gifts, carefully selecting thoughtful items for Lily and Emma. On Christmas Eve, they packed their car with presents and baked goods and set off for Emma and Lily's home, the trunk filled to the brim with reminders of the love they carried with them. When they arrived, the house was lit with twinkling lights, and the sound of holiday music spilled out as Emma opened the door. Lily rushed forward, her face lighting up as she saw James and Eleanor. "Miss Eleanor! Mr. James!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around them. Eleanor hugged her tightly, blinking back tears. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." James crouched down to her level, smiling. "Merry Christmas, kiddo." The evening was filled with warmth and joy as they shared stories, opened presents, and laughed together. Lily's excitement was contagious as she tore open her gifts, gasping with delight at each one. As the night drew to a close, James and Eleanor sat by the fire with Emma, watching Lily play with her new toys. "Thank you for being here," Emma said, her voice filled with emotion. "It means so much to Lily and to me." James glanced at Eleanor, his expression soft. "It means a lot to us too. This feels like home." Eleanor nodded, her heart full, because it is. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of family and the glow of the holiday, James and Eleanor realized that the bonds they had formed with Lily and Emma were more than just fleeting connections. They were lasting, built on love, kindness, and the shared belief that family isn't just about where you come from, it's about who you choose to hold close. Christmas morning dawned with a quiet beauty, the soft glow of sunlight reflecting off the snow-covered streets outside Emma's home. Inside, the house was already alive with excitement as Lily darted around in her new pajamas, showing James and Eleanor every corner of her world. She proudly displayed her collection of drawings, her bookshelf filled with brightly colored stories, and even her growing assortment of teddy bears, all carefully arranged on her bed. "Mr. James, look," Lily said, tugging him by the hand to show him a picture she had drawn of the brownstone. It was filled with familiar details: the garden, the bird feeder, and the 3 smiling figures labeled Miss Eleanor, Mr. James, and me. James crouched down, studying the drawing with a warm smile. "You've got a great memory, kiddo. It looks just like home." Lily grinned. "That's because it is home, one of my homes anyway." His chest tightened at her words. She had said it so simply, but it meant the world to him. In the living room, Eleanor sat with Emma, sipping coffee and watching the morning unfold. Emma smiled, her gaze soft as she looked toward her daughter. "She's so happy to have you both here. I think she feels like she has two families now." Eleanor reached over, placing a comforting hand on Emma's. "And that's exactly what she has. We're here for her, and for you, whenever you need us." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You've given her so much love. I'll never be able to thank you enough." As they spoke, Lily ran back into the room, dragging a large box wrapped in colorful paper. "This one's for you, Miss Eleanor," she said excitedly, placing the box in Eleanor's lap. Eleanor's eyes widened in surprise. "For me? Oh, Lily, you didn't have to." Lily bounced on her toes, her smile radiant. "Open it, open it." Inside was a beautifully framed photo of Lily holding Mr. Buttons, taken during her first visit to the brownstone. Around the frame, Lily had glued small decorations, hearts, stars, and flowers. "I made it with Mommy," she said proudly, "so you can always remember me." Eleanor hugged her tightly, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, sweetheart, I could never forget you. Thank you. This is the most precious gift." James watched the exchange from his spot by the window, feeling the warmth of the moment fill the room. But as much as he was moved by the happiness around him, he couldn't shake a lingering thought. The realization of how much Lily had come to mean to him, and how deeply she had changed him. "Mr. James," Lily called, pulling him from his thoughts. "Your turn." She handed him a smaller box, her excitement evident. He opened it to find a hand-painted wooden birdhouse, decorated with bright colors and little flowers. "Mommy helped me paint it," Lily explained. "It's for the garden at your house, so the birds have somewhere to live when I'm not there to feed them." James's throat tightened as he held the small birdhouse in his hands. "This is perfect, Lily. Thank you." "You like it?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "I love it," James said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's one of the best gifts I've ever gotten." The room fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from being surrounded by love and understanding. As Lily busied herself with her new toys, James and Eleanor exchanged a glance, each of them silently acknowledging the profound impact this little girl had had on their lives. Later in the day, as the snow continued to fall outside, the group gathered around the fireplace. Lily curled up between James and Eleanor, her head resting on Eleanor's shoulder and her teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. "Miss Eleanor," she said softly, her voice filled with drowsy contentment, "this is the best Christmas ever." Eleanor smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "It's the best Christmas for us too, sweetheart, because you're here." Lily turned her gaze to James, her eyes shining. "Do you think we can have Christmas together every year?" James looked at her for a long moment, his heart full. "I think that's a great idea, kiddo." Lily beamed, her smile lighting up the room. "Good, because I want to be with my whole family for Christmas, Mommy and you and Miss Eleanor." The simplicity of her words brought a wave of emotion to everyone in the room. Emma wiped at her eyes, and Eleanor held Lily a little closer. James felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Lily, but for the way she had brought them all together. As the fire crackled softly in the background, the moment felt complete, as though all the pieces of their lives had fallen into place. The bonds they had formed weren't temporary. They were permanent, built on love, trust, and the shared understanding that family could be found in the most unexpected ways. In that warm and peaceful moment, James realized that the love they had shared with Lily had changed not just her life but his as well. She had shown him the kind of man he wanted to be and the kind of family he wanted to build. The weeks after Christmas were filled with a renewed sense of purpose for James and Eleanor. Though their lives had returned to their usual routines, they carried the memories of their time with Lily like a quiet warmth, a constant reminder of the joy and connection she had brought into their world. For Eleanor, the lessons Lily had taught her were profound. She spent more time volunteering at the local shelter, helping families who, like Lily and Emma, had faced difficult circumstances. Each child she met reminded her of Lily's resilience and the power of kindness to transform lives. On the afternoons she spent organizing toy drives or reading to the children, she often found herself smiling, imagining what Lily might say about her efforts. James, too, found himself changed in ways he hadn't expected. Once consumed by his work and ambition, he now prioritized his personal life in a way that surprised even him. He began leaving the office earlier, taking long walks in the park and visiting the garden where Lily had taught him to feed the birds. The birdhouse she had painted for him stood proudly in the center of the garden, a small but meaningful symbol of the love they had shared. One crisp January afternoon, James joined Eleanor in the kitchen as she prepared tea. The house was quiet, save for the sound of the kettle whistling on the stove. "You've been spending a lot of time outside lately," Eleanor said, handing him a steaming cup. James nodded, leaning against the counter. "It helps me think. I've been reflecting a lot on what Lily taught us." Eleanor smiled, her gaze soft. "She taught us what it means to love without reservation, to open our hearts, even when it's not easy." James looked at her thoughtfully. "It's funny, isn't it? I used to think success was about numbers, deals, and recognition, but now it feels like it's about moments, people, the connections we make." Eleanor reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You've grown so much, James, and I know Lily would be proud of you." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the mail slot clattering. Eleanor walked to the door, picking up a small stack of letters. Among them was an envelope decorated with colorful stickers and addressed in Lily's familiar handwriting. "She wrote again," Eleanor said, her voice lighting up with excitement. James smiled as he set his tea down, following her into the living room. Together they opened the letter, which was filled with Lily's characteristic cheer. "Dear Miss Eleanor and Mr. James, I hope you're feeding the birds every day. Mr. Buttons is doing great and he says he misses you too. Mommy and I are doing lots of fun things, but I still think about the brownstone all the time. Mommy says maybe we can come visit again soon. I love you both so much. Love, Lily." Enclosed with the letter was another drawing, a picture of Lily standing in the garden at the brownstone, with birds flying overhead and James and Eleanor beside her. Beneath it, she had written in large, colorful letters, "Family forever." Eleanor held the drawing close, her eyes misty. "She's such a special little girl," she said softly. James nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. "She is, and she'll always be part of our family." The letter inspired them both to write back immediately. James and Eleanor spent the afternoon crafting a response, sharing updates about the garden, the birds, and their plans for spring. James included a photo of the birdhouse Lily had painted, now surrounded by snow, but still standing proudly in the garden. "You're always welcome here," they wrote. "This will always be your home too." In the weeks that followed, the letters became a cherished ritual. Each one was a bridge connecting their worlds, a testament to the bond they had built. And with each exchange, James and Eleanor felt their connection to Lily and Emma grow stronger. As winter turned to spring, James found himself looking forward to the future in a way he hadn't in years. The brownstone, once a symbol of his ambition and independence, now felt like a true home, a place filled with love, memories, and the promise of new beginnings. Eleanor, too, embraced the changes in her life with open arms. The relationship she had formed through her volunteer work deepened her sense of purpose, and she often found herself sharing stories of Lily's kindness and courage with the families she helped. One evening, as they sat together on the back porch watching the sunset, Eleanor turned to James and said, "You know she changed everything for us." James nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "She did. She reminded us of what really matters, family, love, and the way small moments can make the biggest difference." Eleanor smiled, her heart full. "She was a gift, James, and we'll carry that gift with us forever." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a warm golden light, James and Eleanor sat in comfortable silence, grateful for the journey they had shared. The love they had given and received had transformed their lives in ways they hadn't thought possible, leaving them with a lasting truth. Sometimes, the most unexpected connections become the ones that define us. This heartwarming story reminds us of the profound impact we can have on each other's lives when we open our hearts. Lily's journey taught James and Eleanor the true meaning of family, that it isn't just about shared bloodlines, but the love, kindness, and connections we choose to nurture. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on the relationships in your own life. Is there someone who needs your kindness or support? Sometimes the smallest gestures, a phone call, a handwritten note, or a listening ear, can create lasting bonds that transform lives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that celebrate love, resilience, and the beauty of human connections. Let's share these moments of hope with others, reminding them that even in unexpected circumstances, we can find family and love in the most extraordinary ways. Stay tuned for our next story, It might just be the spark of inspiration you've been looking for. See you soon.